The woman who disappeared. The wind carried the scent of autumn through the small suburban town, leaves rustling like whispers of secrets long buried, and among those quiet houses stood a modest white cottage with blue shutters where Amelia, Grace Harper, lived a life that no one would ever imagine belonged to a woman born into one of the richest medical dynasties in the country. Yet there she was, dressed in soft cotton, her hair tied in a loose bun, a gentle hand resting on her rounded belly as she watered the tiny garden she'd grown from scratch, tomatoes, lavender, and hope, everything she now depended on for peace. To her neighbors, she was just Mrs. Grace, the warm school teacher who smiled at everyone, who helped kids cross the street, who baked cookies for block parties. But to those who once knew her as Amelia Harper, she was the woman who vanished without a trace 5 years ago, the heiress who walked away from fortune, power, and privilege to choose a love that she believed was pure, real, and worth losing everything for. Her mornings were slow now, quiet moments filled with baby kicks and morning tea, but inside her calm routines lived an unease she could no longer silence. For Daniel, her husband, had changed, and not in small ways but in sharp, cutting edges that sliced through her once gentle world. He used to bring her flowers after work, kiss her forehead before bed, and whisper that their love was stronger than money or status. But lately he came home late, smelled like perfume that wasn't hers, and spent more time looking at his phone than looking at her. At first she convinced herself it was stress, that his new business deal was taking longer to settle, that exhaustion made him distant, but deep down, in the quiet hours when the baby moved and the house was silent, she felt it, the cold pull of betrayal, the kind her mother had warned her about, the kind that made her walk away from her family 5 years ago. Amelia often thought about that last day at the Harper estate, the day she told her mother she was marrying Daniel. Margaret Harper, the formidable CEO of Harper Memorial Hospital, had stood by the tall windows of her marble office, hands clasped behind her back, her voice firm and sharp like polished glass. "If you marry that man, you walk away from everything," she had said. And Amelia, blinded by love and pain, had whispered, "Then I'll walk away." It was the easiest hard decision she had ever made, one that left her with nothing but the belief that love was enough, that a simple life built on kindness was worth more than diamonds and legacy. But now, standing by the kitchen window watching the sun dip below the horizon, she wasn't sure anymore. Love had started to feel like a memory, fading faster than the light across her living room walls. The phone rang once, twice before she picked it up, her heart fluttering in that nervous way it did every time Daniel's name appeared on the screen. But it wasn't him. It was an unknown number, and when she answered, a woman's voice filled the line, low, trembling, and cold. "He's mine," the voice said before the line went dead. Amelia froze, the air thick around her, her pulse racing so fast she had to steady herself against the counter. She had been getting these calls for weeks, sometimes messages with no name, no explanation, only one repeating theme. "He doesn't love you anymore." Each time she deleted them, blocked the numbers, and told herself it was just jealousy from someone confused, someone obsessed, someone not real. But the fear was real. The pit in her stomach was real, and the doubt that gnawed at her heart was real. That night, Daniel didn't come home until past midnight. Amelia waited on the couch, a blanket over her swollen belly, exhaustion heavy in her bones but hope heavier in her heart. When he finally walked in, his shirt wrinkled, tie loose, he looked surprised to see her awake. "You should be sleeping," he said, setting his keys down. She smiled weakly. "I couldn't," she said softly. "The baby's been kicking all night." He barely glanced at her stomach, just nodded and walked past into the kitchen, pouring himself a drink like nothing mattered. When she asked if everything was okay, he said, "Just business," his tone flat and final, the kind that ended conversations instead of starting them. She wanted to ask him about the phone calls, about the perfume, about the distance, but fear of pushing him away made her swallow the words. Instead, she whispered, "I love you," and he nodded again. Eyes cold, voice absent. "I know." In bed, while Daniel slept facing the wall, Amelia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the baby move beneath her hand like a quiet promise that something inside her was still good, still worth fighting for. But in that same moment, she made a silent vow. If something was wrong, she would find out. She wasn't going to be the woman who waited to be destroyed. She was going to be the woman who found the truth before it found her. The next morning, while Daniel was in the shower, she unlocked his phone, the passcode she had long memorized from the days when love meant trust. Her heart raced as she scrolled through messages, finding nothing at first, until she opened a hidden chat app she had never seen before. And there it was. Photos, messages, words she wished she could unread. I miss you, my love. Soon she'll be out of the way. Our life starts after that baby. Amelia's breath caught, her knees weakened, the room spinning around her. She dropped the phone, clutched the counter and whispered no over and over, as if the word could rewrite what she had just seen. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Not while her baby still grew inside her. Not while her back still carried the weight of both fear and hope. Instead, she planned quietly, carefully, searching for a way to leave once the baby was born. She looked up shelters for mothers, legal aid offices, private savings she had hidden long ago in case of emergencies. But love, even when dying, leaves its residue of hesitation. She wanted to believe there was a reason, that Daniel wasn't evil, that maybe the messages were old, a mistake, a misunderstanding. And so she waited for signs, for truth, for courage. What she didn't know was that the truth was already on its way to find her, not through a text or a confession, but through fire. It was a Saturday afternoon when the knock came, 3 sharp raps, quick and urgent. Amelia was in the kitchen, folding baby clothes, humming softly, the sunlight painting gold patterns across the floor. The sound startled her, but she wasn't expecting anyone, so she walked to the door with cautious curiosity. Through the glass, she saw a woman, tall, dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail, sunglasses hiding her eyes, holding something in both hands. Amelia hesitated. Something in the woman's posture felt wrong. Something in her stillness felt dangerous. "Can I help you?" Amelia called through the door, her voice polite but unsure. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lifted her head slowly, her lips trembling as she whispered, "You took everything from me." The words froze Amelia in place. Before she could respond, the woman pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes red from crying and madness, and Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She had seen her before, once at Daniel's office party months ago, a woman he introduced as a client. The memory struck like lightning, connecting the dots of months of doubt, and before she could move, before she could lock the door, the woman lifted the pot she had been holding, steam rising from it like smoke, and screamed, "He was mine." The door burst open, the world blurred into chaos, and in that instant the life Amelia had built, the love she had believed in, and the peace she had tried to protect shattered into pieces. The attack that changed everything. The moment the pot left the woman's hands, time seemed to slow, as if the world itself held its breath before the storm, the boiling oil arcing through the air in a glistening, horrifying trail, and all Amelia could do was turn instinctively, shielding her belly with both arms, her only thought the small life growing inside her. The next second exploded into agony. A scream ripped from deep within her chest as the oil struck her back, searing through the thin cotton of her dress, clinging to her skin, spreading pain that felt like fire-made flesh. The sound that came from her throat didn't even feel human. It was raw, wild, primal. A sound of betrayal, fear, and unbearable suffering woven together into a single, desperate cry. The woman who attacked her, Sophie Lang, stood frozen for a second, as if realizing too late what she had done, her trembling hand still clutching the empty pot, her breath ragged, her face twisted between hatred and horror. "He doesn't love you," she screamed, her voice breaking. "He never loved you. You trapped him with that baby." But Amelia couldn't even hear her anymore. The world around her was fading into a blur of light and sound, the smell of burning oil filling the air, the pain crawling across her back like fire eating through paper. Her knees gave way, the porch rushing up to meet her, cold concrete against her skin, her hands instinctively moving to protect her stomach, whispering words that came out as broken gasps. "Please, my baby, please." She could feel the heat spreading, the skin blistering, the edges of her vision going dark, her breath catching in short, desperate bursts. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear voices, neighbors shouting, footsteps running, doors opening, a chorus of alarm rising through the quiet neighborhood. "Call 911, someone yelled. "Oh my God, she's pregnant," cried another. Sophie dropped the pot and ran, her heels clicking frantically against the pavement as she disappeared down the street, leaving behind the echo of her guilt and the devastation she had caused. Amelia lay there on her side, shaking uncontrollably, her heart pounding faster than she could control, tears mixing with the burning oil, her mind clinging to one thought. The baby has to live. Mrs. Patterson, her elderly neighbor from next door, was the first to reach her. The 70-year-old woman had never moved so fast in her life. Her slippers slapped against the porch steps as she dropped to her knees beside Amelia, her face pale with horror. "Dear God, Amelia," she whispered, her trembling hands hovering helplessly over the burns. "Hold on, sweetheart, just hold on, don't move. Help is coming." She ran back inside her own house, returning with wet towels and a bowl of cool water, trying to soothe the burns. But the moment the towel touched Amelia's back, the pain flared tenfold, pulling another scream from her lips. I'm sorry, Mrs. Patterson cried, tears streaming down her face. "I just don't know what to do." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second, slicing through the still afternoon like a promise of salvation. Amelia could barely move, barely breathe. The fire under her skin was too much, too cruel, and every breath felt like dragging glass through her lungs. She whispered her baby's name, the name she and Daniel had chosen months ago. "Lila," she breathed. "Stay with me, my love, stay with me." When the paramedics arrived, everything became noise and motion. The pounding of boots on the porch, the rustle of medical bags, the clipped, focused voices that came from professionals trying to stay calm in the face of horror. "We've got second and third degree burns over the upper back and shoulders," said one of them, his tone steady but urgent. "She's 8 months pregnant," Mrs. Patterson said between sobs, "and her husband, oh God, he's not here." "We'll take care of her," the paramedic replied gently, crouching beside Amelia. "Ma'am, can you hear me? We're going to help you, but I need your name." Amelia blinked through tears, her voice faint. "Amelia and Sutton," she said, hesitating on the last name that felt like a lie now. "All right, Amelia," the female paramedic said, checking her vitals, her movements quick but careful. "We're going to give you oxygen and something for the pain. We'll take you to the best hospital in the area, okay?" Which one?" Amelia gasped, barely managing the words. "Westfield Memorial," the man answered. "It's got the only burn and maternity ICU in 3 counties. The name hit her harder than the pain. Westfield Memorial, her family's hospital, the empire her mother still ruled with iron precision, the same building she had promised herself she would never step into again. "No," she whispered weakly, "please, anywhere else." But the paramedic shook his head, his expression kind but unyielding. "We don't have time, ma'am. You and your baby need critical care. It's the best place for both of you." And so, with the sirens wailing and the city flashing by outside the ambulance windows, Amelia found herself being carried back into the very world she had abandoned, the world she thought she had escaped forever. Inside the ambulance, she felt the cool touch of oxygen against her face, the steady hands of the paramedics working around her, the rhythmic beeping of machines, and the faint thump of her baby's heartbeat through the monitor they had wrapped around her belly. The sound was too fast, too frantic, and Amelia's fear deepened.
"The baby," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is she okay?"
The female paramedic looked at the monitor and then at her, offering the gentlest lie anyone had ever told. "We're doing everything we can," she said softly. "Just keep breathing for her, okay?" Amelia nodded weakly, clutching at the edges of consciousness, her mind drifting between past and present, between love and betrayal. She thought of Daniel. Where was he? Did he know? Did he care? Part of her wanted to believe he would come running, that he would be horrified, that he would hold her hand and promise to protect her. But another colder part whispered that this had been his plan all along, that Sophie hadn't acted alone, that maybe he knew exactly what would happen today. When they reached the hospital, the emergency doors flew open, and the rush of fluorescent light hit her like an awakening. She was wheeled through corridors filled with nurses, doctors, and the familiar antiseptic scent of her childhood. A scent that once meant safety, but now meant fear. As the stretcher turned a corner, Amelia caught a glimpse of the hospital logo on the wall, the Harper crest, her family's name shining in silver letters above the main desk. And for the first time in 5 years, she realized she couldn't hide from who she really was anymore. The doctors and nurses worked quickly, calling out medical terms she could barely process, their movements a blur of precision and urgency. She could feel their hands on her skin, cutting away the ruined fabric, covering the burns with dressings that stung but soothed. The pain medication made her dizzy, made the world soft and hazy, but even in that haze she heard one voice that pulled her back to clarity, deep, calm, familiar. "Amelia?" the voice said, and she turned her head slightly, her eyes struggling to focus on the man standing at the foot of her bed. Dr. Ethan Cole, her father's protege, the surgeon who had worked alongside Patrick Harper for years before his death, the man who had come to her father's funeral and told her to call if she ever needed anything. He looked older now, lines deeper around his eyes, his hair grayer, but his expression, that mix of compassion and quiet strength, hadn't changed. "You're safe," he said softly, and for the first time since the attack, Amelia felt a flicker of something like safety, like the faint memory of home. But then he looked at her chart, at her burns, at her name, and his expression shifted from professional calm to personal shock. "Amelia Harper," he whispered, as if saying her true name would wake a ghost. "My God. We thought you were gone." She wanted to speak, to explain, to tell him she had needed to disappear, but all that came out was a choked sob. "Please," she managed, "my baby." Dr. Cole nodded immediately. "We've got a fetal team coming down now. You focus on breathing. We'll take care of both of you." The next few hours blurred into fragments, flashes of bright lights, murmured voices, the cold sting of antiseptics, the warmth of hands holding hers, and the faint, rhythmic sound of her baby's heartbeat on the monitor. Through the fog of medication and exhaustion, she caught snippets of conversation she couldn't fully understand. Words like burn depth, fetal distress, oxygen saturation, sedation levels, and yet, every sound of the hospital pulled her deeper into a reality she couldn't escape. The secret she had buried for 5 years was out, her identity rediscovered not through fame or fortune but through fire and pain. And as she drifted in and out of consciousness, she saw her mother's face in her mind, cold, proud, unforgiving, and wondered what she would say if she knew that her daughter, the one who had turned her back on everything, was lying broken in her own hospital. By the time night fell, the immediate crisis had passed. Amelia was alive. Her baby's heartbeat, though still fast, was steady. The doctors had managed to stabilize her, the nurses had dressed her wounds with care, and the world had quieted to the soft beeping of machines and the hum of hospital air. She stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, her body heavy with exhaustion but her mind burning with thoughts she couldn't silence. She thought about Sophie, where she had gone, what would happen to her, and about Daniel, whose silence now felt louder than any scream. He hadn't called, not once, not even after the paramedics left a message on his phone. The reality of that truth settled deep in her chest, colder than the IV fluids running through her veins. He wasn't coming. He never had been the man she thought he was. The love she'd sacrificed everything for had turned out to be the weapon that destroyed her. And yet as she turned her head to the side, her eyes catching the gentle rise and fall of her stomach beneath the blankets, she realized that she wasn't truly alone. Her baby was still fighting. She was still fighting, and somewhere beyond the hospital walls, beyond the flashing lights and whispered rumors, the world was already beginning to stir, news starting to spread, about a mysterious attack, a pregnant woman, and an ER doctor who recognized her as the long-lost Harper heiress. The life she had hidden for half a decade was about to be thrust into the spotlight again, and there would be no going back. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, the monitors beside her pulsing in time with her heartbeat, one thought whispered through her mind like a prophecy. The woman who disappeared had returned, and the world would never be the same again. The hidden legacy. The hidden legacy. When Amelia woke the next morning, sunlight filtered through the half-closed blinds, painting pale gold stripes across the sterile white walls of her hospital room. The light gentle but indifferent, as if it did not care that the woman lying in that bed had been through fire the day before. The first thing she felt was pain, deep and pulsing, spreading from her back outward like a slow tide of heat. But beneath it was another feeling, life, faint but persistent, the soft flutter of movement inside her belly that told her the baby was still there, still fighting. She closed her eyes and let the tears come, silent and endless, not just for the pain but for the relief that her child had survived, for the confusion of being back in a place she swore she would never enter again, and for the strange, haunting truth that her old identity had followed her home, refusing to die even after years of trying to bury it. The machines around her hummed softly, their beeping steady like a heartbeat. Nurses moved quietly in and out of the room, checking vitals, changing IV lines, whispering instructions in practiced tones. Yet every few minutes she caught them looking at her, curious eyes that lingered a second too long, the kind that belonged to people who already knew her story before she could tell it herself. She didn't have to ask what they were whispering about. She could feel it in the air. The recognition, the shock, the gossip that traveled faster than medicine inside hospital walls. The burned pregnant woman who came in last night wasn't just another patient. She was Amelia Harper, the missing daughter of the hospital's founder, the woman who had walked away from her fortune and returned through tragedy. And though the staff tried to be discreet, Amelia had grown up in these hallways. She knew the rhythm of the place, the way news pulsed through it like electricity. By now, the whole hospital would know. And if the hospital knew, then her mother knew too. She tried to brace herself for what that meant, but nothing could truly prepare her for facing Margaret Harper again. The last memory she had of her mother was the sound of the office door closing after their final argument 5 years ago, the sound of a world shutting her out. Her mother's words that day still echoed through her mind. If you walk away with him, you walk away from all of this, your inheritance, your family, your name. Amelia had thought she was strong when she said yes to that ultimatum, when she packed her bags and left the Harper estate with only a suitcase and the man she believed loved her. But now, lying in a hospital bed covered in bandages, abandoned by that same man, she felt small again, fragile, stripped of the confidence that once made her think love could conquer legacy. The door opened softly, and Dr. Ethan Cole stepped inside. His expression calm, but his eyes carrying the kind of sorrow that only years of seeing too much pain can teach. "Good morning," he said gently, his voice low so as not to startle her. He moved closer to the bed, glancing at the monitor before meeting her gaze. "You gave everyone quite a scare." Amelia tried to smile, but it came out more like a tremor. "I seem to have a talent for that," she whispered. He pulled up a chair beside her bed, sitting down with the weary grace of someone who had spent the night working and thinking far too much. "Your vitals are improving," he said, glancing at the chart in his hand, "and your baby's heartbeat has stabilized. She's a fighter just like her mother." The words warmed something inside Amelia that had gone cold since the attack. "A girl?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Yes, a girl." "You didn't know?" Amelia shook her head slowly. "I wanted to be surprised," she said, her voice breaking, "but I suppose life had other plans." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Amelia, the hospital knows who you are." She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling the truth she already felt coming. "I figured," she said. "You grew up here, everyone remembers you," he continued. "And when the registration nurse saw your full name, it spread fast. Your mother was contacted last night. She's on her way." The air in the room thickened, pressing against her chest until she could barely breathe. "She's coming here?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, and I think she's more worried than she wants anyone to know." Amelia turned her face toward the window, her reflection faint in the glass, pale and bandaged, almost unrecognizable. "Worried," she repeated softly, the word tasting strange. "I thought she stopped worrying about me years ago." Ethan didn't argue. He knew better than to defend Margaret Harper. Everyone in this hospital knew her reputation. Brilliant, relentless, proud. The kind of woman who could save lives on one floor and fire a department head on the next without losing a night's sleep. But to Amelia, she was simply the mother who couldn't understand love that didn't fit into board meetings or balance sheets. Still, Ethan's voice carried something almost pleading when he said, "She's still your mother." Amelia didn't answer. She just stared out the window, watching a bird land on the railing outside, wings trembling before it flew away again. An hour later, the quiet was broken by the click of high heels in the hallway. Sharp, deliberate, a sound Amelia could recognize even after years apart. Her heartbeat quickened. The door opened and Margaret Harper entered, every inch the formidable woman she had always been. Her hair was a smooth wave of silver and chestnut, her navy suit immaculate, pearls at her throat catching the morning light. But beneath the armor of power, her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with fatigue that she couldn't hide. The nurses straightened instinctively as she passed, a reflex born from years of command, but Margaret didn't even look at them. Her eyes went straight to the bed, to her daughter, to the bandages, to the faint tremor in Amelia's hand. For a moment she said nothing. The silence between them was heavy, full of unsaid apologies and unhealed wounds. Then her voice came, softer than Amelia remembered but still edged with control. "Who did this to you?" The question broke something inside Amelia. All the composure she had been clinging to dissolved and she began to cry. Not small tears, but deep, shaking sobs that came from a place she hadn't let anyone touch in years. "His mistress," she managed between breaths. "Daniel's mistress." Margaret's jaw tightened, fury flickering in her eyes. "Where is he?" she demanded. Amelia shook her head. "I don't know. He hasn't called. He hasn't even—" Her voice failed and she looked away, ashamed of the truth. For all her pain, for all the humiliation, a small part of her had still hoped he would come, that he would walk through that door and prove he wasn't the monster her mother had warned her about. But he didn't. He never would. Margaret moved closer, her steps slow, cautious as if she were approaching something fragile that could shatter at a touch. When she reached the bed, she hesitated for only a second before resting her hand gently against Amelia's hair. "You should never have had to face this alone," she whispered, and though her tone was restrained, her hand trembled. Amelia turned her face toward her, tears glistening on her cheeks. "You told me to leave," she said softly. "You said if I walked away, I was on my own." Margaret's eyes filled with something that looked dangerously like regret. "I know," she said quietly, "and I have replayed that moment every day since." The air between them shifted, a fragile bridge forming where only silence had existed for years. The reunion might have broken the walls between mother and daughter, if not for the chaos unfolding beyond their control. News outlets had already caught the story: the mysterious attack, the pregnant victim, the revelation that she was the missing Harper heiress. Reporters swarmed the hospital gates, cameras flashing, headlines screaming of scandal and betrayal. Heiress attacked by husband's mistress. Missing daughter returns through fire. The hospital PR department scrambled to contain the attention, but it was too late. The world wanted to know the story, and they wanted it now. Inside the hospital, detectives began their investigation, interviewing nurses, neighbors, and eventually Amelia herself. Their questions were methodical but cold. Every detail another wound reopened. "Do you know the woman who attacked you?" one asked. "Have you had issues with your husband recently?" Another pressed. Amelia answered what she could, her voice quiet but clear, describing Sophie, the messages, the fear, the growing distance from Daniel. When they asked if she believed he was involved, she hesitated, her heart warring with reason. "I don't want to believe he would do this," she said finally, but he knew she was unstable and he did nothing to stop her. The detectives exchanged a glance that said everything. They already suspected more. By the third day, the case had grown darker. Bank statements emerged, showing Daniel withdrawing large sums of money from their joint account. Money that was traced to a woman matching Sophie's description. There were text messages, too, retrieved from phone records, discussing insurance, inheritances, and a phrase that made Amelia's blood run cold. "Once she's gone, it's all ours." Each revelation was another blade twisting inside her chest. The man she had loved, defended, and built a life with hadn't just betrayed her. He had plotted against her, built his future on her destruction. Margaret stayed at her side through every revelation. The once unyielding woman who lived for control now sat quietly beside her daughter's bed, reading her reports, speaking softly to the doctors, and holding Amelia's hand when nightmares woke her screaming. For the first time, Amelia saw her mother not as a titan but as a woman. A mother who had lost too much and was terrified of losing again. "You don't have to fight this alone," Margaret said one evening, her voice low. "You have me now." And though Amelia wanted to resist, wanted to stay strong and independent, something inside her surrendered to that truth. She'd been alone long enough. Dr. Ethan visited every day, checking her wounds, adjusting her treatments, offering quiet comfort that never crossed into pity. In his eyes, she saw the reflection of the girl she once was, the bright, fearless heiress who used to follow her father around the hospital halls, dreaming of making a difference. One afternoon, as he changed her bandages, he said gently, "You know, your father always said you were the heart of this place. He used to tell me, she's got more compassion in her little finger than most people have in their whole body. I think he'd be proud to see you now, even after everything." The words struck deep and Amelia smiled through her tears. He believed in people, she whispered. He believed love could heal anything. I guess that's where I got it from. Ethan smiled sadly. Then it's time you start healing yourself, Amelia. Not just your body, your name, your life, your legacy. That night, as the hospital quieted into its usual hum of machines and muted footsteps, Amelia stared at the ceiling, the shadows shifting softly across it. For the first time in years, she thought about the Harper name not as a burden, but as a promise, one she had run from for too long. She had been burned, betrayed, and broken, but beneath the ashes something stronger was forming, something her father would have recognized instantly. Strength, purpose, fire that no one could use to destroy her again. As she drifted into sleep, her mother's silhouette lingered by the window, watching over her, the same way she had when Amelia was a child. And somewhere deep inside the hospital, in the records room that bore her family's crest, the legacy of the Harper name stirred once more, waiting for its rightful heir to return, not the heiress who left for love, but the woman who had survived it, the truth beneath the flames. The days that followed blurred together in a strange rhythm of pain and healing, each sunrise arriving like a silent test of endurance, each night stretching endlessly into the dim hum of hospital machines and whispered footsteps. The scent of antiseptic had become part of Amelia's world, mingling with the faint sweetness of her baby lotion, with the scent of the roses that someone left by her bedside every morning. Roses she suspected were from her mother, though Margaret never admitted it. Every movement was a struggle, the burns across her back still raw beneath the dressings, the slightest shift sending waves of pain that reminded her of how close she had come to losing everything. But through the pain, there was a pulse of purpose awakening inside her, a sense that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to see the truth buried beneath all the lies that had ruled her life for years. Detectives came and went, their questions precise, their voices calm in that detached professional tone that made tragedy sound procedural. They asked about Daniel's business dealings, about Sophie Lang's history, about the phone calls and the bank transfers, and every answer Amelia gave seemed to uncover something darker. Detective Rowan, the lead investigator, was a tall man with a slow, deliberate way of speaking, as though each word he chose was a step he had to measure carefully. One afternoon he came to her room carrying a thin folder, his expression unreadable. "We found something," he said, his tone too neutral to be good news. Margaret was sitting beside the bed and both women looked up sharply. Rowan opened the folder, revealing printouts, bank statements, screenshots of text messages, photographs. He placed them carefully on the table, sliding them forward. "We've confirmed that your husband and Miss Lang were in contact for over a year," he said, "long before you knew about her. There were multiple transfers from your joint account to an offshore one under her name." Amelia's throat tightened, her hands curling against the bedsheet. "How much?" she asked quietly. "Over $600,000, Rowan replied. The number hit like a physical blow. She had known Daniel's business was failing, but she had believed his losses were temporary, the kind that love and patience could fix. Instead, he had been draining her, using her savings, her trust, her name, and now her life.